I'm sure it's escaped no one's attention that late last year we got our first real campaign setting book since Sword Coast Adventures Guide. And instead of it being a tried and true D&D setting, or something completely new, we got a world from Magic the Gathering, rather forcefully plunged into our D&D. Now, this is hardly something new. Magic and D&D have been slowly crossing over for a few years now. Each time a new block of cards was released for Magic, focusing on a new world, we will get a little PDF called Planeshift, released alongside it, with rules and ideas for how to play D&D in that particular world. By now we have seen the release of 6 PDFs covering 6 different worlds, and each time they built on the previous one, introducing new concepts until finally they decided to go all out with the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Now I feel the need to preface this video with the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Magic the Gathering. I used to play it religiously back when I was a kid and it was new, but after a few years I grew tired of it, and I will only occasionally play a few matches online or with my younger brother, who is a huge fan. I just find trading card games to be competitive and too much of a time and money sink for me to enjoy them anymore. I'm also a huge fan of established D&D lore, and many of the worlds and settings already available. All that being said, I don't hate the MTG D&D crossover that happened. In fact, I think that overall it's been a boon to D&D, although not entirely an unproblematic one. And that's sort of what I would like to discuss here. Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering share a lot of similarities on the surface. They're both these epic fantasy settings spanning multiple worlds with sweeping story arcs and grand heroics, but on a deeper level, the two game worlds are incredibly different. Mostly the differences are on a cosmic and metaphysical level. The laws of nature that bind together worlds in the two settings are quite different. D&D has its layers of planes, alignments, positive and negative energy, the balance between good and evil, while Magic has the 5 colors of mana that are an essential part of all things and shape their existence, its own planes separated by Aether and the Blind Eternities, that function very differently from the ones in D&D. The solution the Wizards came up with is rather crude but effective. Instead of trying to create a 5th edition system based on the fundamental laws of Magic the Gathering, they just ignore all of the depth and focus on the surface layers. Like I said earlier, at a glance, the two games have a lot in common. Ravnica and Planeshift is actually just D&D, with a fresh coat of Magic the Gathering slathered all over it. The colors of Magic are reduced to window dressing at best, and Magic itself works along the D&D laws of nature. And for the most part, this is not a problem. In most adventures, it doesn't really matter where your fireball comes from, or that your goblin character is aligned with red mana. And for us D&D players, this works out in our favor. There's a whole host of new material that we would never have seen that we can just import straight into our games. So even if you have zero interest in Magic the Gathering worlds, we've gotten new spells, monsters, subclasses, player races, and magical items that we can populate our games with. I myself have used monsters from Ravnica in my campaign as a way to throw some curveballs and have my players go up against monsters they are not familiar with. But we don't just have completely new foreign monsters in the Planeshift material. The Innistrad Planeshift PDF, for instance, has several new monsters that are perfect for Ravenloft, but it also has rules for modifying flesh golems, with giving them extra abilities, and more importantly, it has the creepy doll monster, which might seem new to some, but it's actually a 5th edition version of the classic Ravenloft creature the Carrionet, complete with the creepy ability to switch bodies with humanoids. The Ixalan Planeshift has several things that would fit right into Cholt, not least of which is the Frilled Deathspitter dinosaur, more commonly known as a Dilophosaurus. I fully intended to throw one at my players when I ran Tomb of Annihilation, but I even had a miniature for it, but I just never got around to that particular encounter. All of this new material, from centaurs and minotaurs as playable races to new specializations like the Order Cleric, these are things that would never have been made without the help of Magic the Gathering. Because here's the thing, Wizards are very cautious about releasing new books. They barely got to make a 5th edition of D&D at all. It's hard to believe now, but not that long ago D&D was dying. Hasbro wanted to put it on ice, and they were only really interested in keeping it around the property in the hopes of selling out the movie rights. And this wasn't the first time D&D has been on its deathbed either. It could have died back when TSR went under. And one of the major reasons why was the oversaturation of the market. And this is something that has killed off many of the greatest gaming companies in the world. To put it simply, to make money you need to release books. The more books you put out, the bigger and more complex your game becomes. Everybody won't need your new product, so Each release sells a little bit less, but costs the same to make. You need to release more and more products to keep making the same amount of money as your margins decrease, meaning that the quality starts to dip, which means fewer sales. Eventually, your book line becomes so bloated that the new books cost more to produce than they make, and the company fails. Now, Wizards, and perhaps more particularly Hasbro, they're terrified of this happening again, so they're very, very careful about how many books they release and the quality of those products. D&D is kept small, and has been stable. Where Magic the Gathering comes into this is that Magic is the real cash cow of Wizards of the Coast. Magic is the reason Hasbro bought them. It's a whole bunch of loyal consumers, so what Wizard wants is to get all of those card slingers over and into buying D&D products as well. Planeshift, but more importantly Ravnica, is the gateway for them to cross over. The more Magic players that start playing D&D, the more money D&D makes, and that means that they can make more products. The Magic the Gathering material that has been made has all been extra. It hasn't been replacing books that would have been made for D&D anyway. They're products that would never have existed if the crossover would never have happened. And it's essentially bait. Bait that is filled with hidden gems that we can use. Material that we want in our D&D games, but there was never really enough of a commercial interest to develop the things. If you're an old school D&D player, give the Magic books a look over. Ignore the names and the lore, and I think you'll find that there's more than one monster that has sneaked its way back into our edition. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the whole thing, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the Magic and D&D crossover. Is it the death of D&D as we know it, or do you think it will have an overall positive effect on the future of the game that we love? As always, if you enjoyed my little rant, give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. And if you want to support my channel, why not share this video on social media or with your friends? It really helps out a lot. You can also check out my DM's Guild page or follow me on Tumblr or Twitter. I'll add links to all of that in the description below. Until next time, Dungeon Delvers.